Hello and welcome to my little bookish corner of the internet. My name's Harriet. Today I'm going to be talking through the books that I finished reading in the month of June. So June ended up being a pretty good month for me. I ended up reading 10 books, but I'm really happy with the ones that I read, and some of them were quite long and chunky as well, so I am glad to have gone through those. But yeah, let's just get into this. So the first book that I finished in the month of June was Words Are My Matter by Ursula Le Guin. This is a non-fiction collection on Le Guin's writings on kind of life and books from the years 2000 all the way up to 2016. Now there's not too much more I can say about this book apart from that I really loved it. I thought that it was written beautifully. It was such a pleasure to read through Le Guin's writing. I really love the way that her mind works. I have spoken about this book a couple times on my channel, so you're probably sick of me talking about this novel and also just Le Guin in general. She is my favourite author, so it was really nice to read kind of what she thought about the world and her thoughts on different books. And it actually encouraged me to add a couple of books to my wish list to check out in the future, recommended from this wonderful author. So overall, it is hard to rate non-fiction, I know, but I did give this a 5-star rating. I thought it was beautiful, really well written, and such a lovely collection to have. And the next book that I finished, I'm actually not really going to talk about too much because I have got an actual review for it that is spoiler free, so I'll link that down below so you can check that out. But that is The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm sure you all know about this book. If you know anything about The Lord of the Rings, you've probably heard about this book. It's kind of like the Bible of Middle Earth. But I do go a lot more in depth with it in my reviews, so please check that out down below. But as a little spoiler, I did end up giving this a 5-star rating. I thought it was really excellent. I think that it is just incredible how Tolkien created this magical world, and it was just such a lovely thing to read. The next book that I finished is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This is part of a series. I'm not certain if I'm going to continue with the series, but that does not mean that I didn't enjoy this book. So basically this is kind of like a Hunger Games-esque story following our main character, who is a Red, and Reds are kind of like miners on Mars, and they're trying to make Mars habitable. But it turns out that actually Mars has always been habitable, and it is run by the Golds, who are like the elite class. And one of our Reds finds out about this, and it's about his journey into kind of infiltrating society, particularly the upper class society. And it just went in a direction that I really didn't expect it to. It started off quite dystopian, quite violent, and really intense. And then it kind of went into almost like a fantasy, Hunger Gamesy kind of vibe, and that was something that I actually really enjoyed reading. It just wasn't something I was expecting. Definitely threw me off track a little bit there, and I did find some sections to be a little bit longer and dragging a little bit more than others, so the pacing at times was a little bit off. However, overall I did really enjoy this book. I thought it was a very fun and entertaining read. Is it my favourite book ever? Absolutely not, but it is definitely above average for me. And there's a chance I might continue with this series if I am looking for something along those lines, but I am not at the moment, so I don't think I'll be picking up the next couple of books. But overall, I did give it a 4-star rating. The next book that I picked up is another non-fiction, so I was really getting on that non-fiction kick this month. And that was This Is Going to Hurt, Secret Diaries of a Junior Doctor by Adam Kay. I actually read this as part of a buddy read with Rachel's Reading Nook. We read a lot of books together. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you've probably figured that out by now, but I will still leave their channel link down below so you can go and check them out. They read a lot of books that sometimes don't get enough hype on the internet, that people don't talk about a lot, and they go really in depth with their reviews and talking about without spoiling anything, so please check their channel out, they are amazing. But anyway, in terms of this book, it is a non-fiction, and it is literally diary entries from a junior doctor from kind of the start of his career up until the end of it and what happened throughout. This was so very emotional. I was already expecting it to be, but it was a mixture of emotions because there were parts that were absolutely hilarious and things that had happened to this person that you just wouldn't believe, but they did actually happen. And then there were times when it was absolutely heartbreaking and horrible to read, and it just made me realise how little support is offered to people that work within the NHS, which is our health service in the UK. It was just absolutely terrifying and really upsetting, but definitely worth reading. It's very eye-opening, so if you're interested in kind of getting a glimpse into how the National Health Service works and the people that are working for that company, then please do give this a read, give it a listen. Or I do know that there is a TV show out that people are really enjoying that follows the same kind of timeline and events that happened, so based off of a true story. But yeah, definitely worth a read if you're interested in it. I ended up giving it a 4-star rating. I don't know if I'll reread it. That's the only reason why it wasn't a 5-star. I don't know if I'll pick it up again, but it was really great to read, and I'm so grateful to Adam Kay for kind of speaking out about things that happened. The next book that I read was actually a reread for me, and I just really was not in a very good place. Things are okay now. I'll actually talk about that at the end of my video, I think. Something happened. A little life update for you. But yeah, I just wanted to reread a book that would make me feel comfortable and safe. So I reread The Farthest Shore by Ursula Le Guin. This is the third book in the Earthsea cycle, which is my favourite series of all time. It's even knocked Harry Potter off the pedestal that I put it on. So I can't say too much about this apart from that it is the third book in the series, and we are following one of our main characters who is in the first two books named Sparrowhawk. The whole series kind of revolves around that main character. He is a wizard. And then we're also following a young prince called Aaron and the adventures they go on as Earthsea is kind of going into this darker realm of magic, or loss of magic I should say, and people are forgetting the names of things and spells and things like that. There's dragons in it, there's danger, there's death. It's all very intense, but I really loved it. It's such an adventure and I am so grateful that I got to read it again. So of course it did get a 5-star rating. I think this is my favourite book within the Earthsea cycle. And then we moved on to another book that also just completely blew me away, and that is Where Heroes Were Born by Tom Dumbrell. This is the third and final book within the Pillars of Peace trilogy. This author is a lot smaller than all of those big hyped authors that you see on Bookstagram and on BookTube, so please do check him out. His books are incredible. This series is kind of based on political intrigue, fancy elements, and it's all kind of medieval, historical fiction, things like that. And we're following our main character named Cyrus throughout the series. However, in this last book, we are more focusing in on his sister named Fran, which is such a lovely thing to read. Obviously, we've been reading from the perspective of a young boy for the first two books, so it's nice to then move on and hear this perspective of a young woman. This was such a heart-wrenching and emotional read. Not only was it super intense with all of these wonderful adventures that Fran is going on, but it's got the big battle at the end where everything kind of comes together. And there are some losses within the book, some of my favourite characters, so it was definitely very emotional for me. I did cry quite a lot, but that means that Tom has done his job very well. So yeah, I don't want to ruin too much. Obviously it's the third book in the series, but please check out this series if you're interested in anything like Game of Thrones, any kind of historical fiction, medieval fiction. It's just such a wonderful read, and I do think it would be suitable for slightly younger readers as well, maybe like YA to adult. But yeah, obviously this got a 5-star rating for me. It's one of my favourite books of the year and one of my favourite series of all time. The next book I picked up is just a very easy and beautiful summer read, and that is Maybe in Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Callum's mum is actually currently reading this, so that's why it's got a little dog ear here. I said that she should pick this up because it is just such a wonderful book to read for the summer. So in this novel we are following a young woman called Hannah, and she moves back to her hometown and is going on a night out with her best friend, and then there's an event that happens on that night out and she has to make a choice. And there are one of two choices that she can make and basically one or two paths that she can take, but we get to follow both of those paths and see where that decision would take her. So it's following these two parallel timelines and what happens to Hannah and the people around her depending on what decision she makes on that one night. Such an interesting and such a fun, emotional read. There were parts that were really sad, but I do like the conversations it had about kind of family and friendship and the importance of that, and also just what Hannah is kind of doing with her life and the decisions that she makes and how they affect other people as well as herself. So it was a very good book. I will say that the main character is supposed to be 29. However, she reads more like a 21 to 23-year-old. She just feels a bit young for the age that she's supposed to be, but that's completely fine. That's the only thing that really threw things off for me, and the fact that this is written a little bit simpler than some of her other books. I don't feel like the characters were as complex, but they did still feel very realistic, which is kind of where Reid pulls through in all of her books. So this ended up being a 4-star rating for me, and I definitely recommend it for the summer. It's just such an easy read. The next book that I picked up is the fourth in a series. I don't think that it's going to be the last. Based on the final sentence within this book, I am hoping it's not the last, but it is A Storm of Sisters by Michelle Harrison. This is the fourth book in the A Pinch of Magic series, a children's to YA series. Such a beautiful read based on these three sisters and the magical adventures that they get up to. This one I really do think I should have read in the winter time. It's definitely more cold based, makes you feel very cozy when you're reading about these beautiful winter markets and things like that. I can't say too much about the story because of course it's the fourth in a series, but I do definitely recommend checking this series out if you're interested. very whimsical, very Studio Ghibli. And as I say, this book kind of left room for another to come after it, which I'm really hoping for, and I do want to read other books by this author as well. But this ended up being a 5-star rating from me. It actually made me cry, which I don't think has happened with the previous 3 books. So yeah, definitely something triggering my emotional response there, but I really, really loved this book. It was phenomenal. The next book I picked up is actually a poetry collection, and I was reading this a little bit last month, so I finished it this month, and that is The Flame by Leonard Cohen. I feel like poetry is something that you can dip in and out of, but I actually ended up kind of binge reading the last section of this poetry collection. It's the last one that he released and some of the last pieces that he ever wrote, so it's definitely very emotional, very reflective, dealing a lot with the idea of death and religion and love. Just such a lovely collection, and as I say, very reflective, very emotional, so something that I would definitely recommend picking up if you're looking for something like that. It's nice that it wasn't super modern like the previous poetry collection that I had read called The Heeding by a completely different author, but it just wasn't my vibe, so I'm glad that this one was, and I'm really glad to have this in my collection. It's hard to rate poetry, but I would give this top marks, 5 stars. I just thought it was really lovely, definitely my kind of vibe. And the final book that I finished this month, finally, I read The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reid. This is such a gorgeous glimpse into mythology and religion that I didn't really know a lot about before, so it definitely delves into that historical aspect. But we are following this young wolf girl. Everyone around her has different powers, and there are seers and things like that, but she has not been born with any. And she basically gets sent to kind of infiltrate and trick this group of men called the Woodsmen that come and take those magical beings from their home settlement and take them to the king. And we don't really know what happens to them there. But this girl gets sent instead and doesn't have any magical powers that we know of. And it's following her journey as she meets with this certain woodsman and what happens between them. It's very romantic, very lusty, a little bit naughty, a little bit spicy. One thing I will say with this book is I found that it was written quite young in comparison to some of the things that were happening in this book. I don't think this would be suitable for YA readers. I do think that there's maybe a little bit too detailed in the spicy scenes and in the violent scenes as well for it to be appropriate, but it reads like a YA novel, if that makes sense. So that was a bit unusual. I did really like the storyline. Our main character is perhaps a little bit whiny and a little bit annoying. That's why it feels like a YA to me. But it's not a bad book by any means. I did really enjoy reading it. I didn't really want to put it down at any point. However, I can't really say that it's anything more than just above average. I'm teetering between a 3.5 and a 4-star. I'm really uncertain because this is obviously the one that I've read the soonest, so I think I need some more time to process it. But I do really like the story. It's definitely very violent, and I do like those spicy scenes. I haven't read many books with that in recently, so it was quite refreshing actually. I feel like just based on the idea of the story and what it was trying to do, I'm leaning more towards that 4-star. Plus this is his author's first published works, which is very impressive actually. I think it's just figuring out whether it's YA or adult, and I don't know, it just throws you off a little bit when you're reading. I don't know if you've ever had an experience like that before, but yeah, not sure if this is going to be a 3.5 or a 4-star, but if you follow me on Instagram, I'm sure I'll update you on there. But yeah, those are all of the books that I read in the month of June. So I read 10 books in total. As I say, that's pretty good for me, considering I was super stressed out. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about my life update. So it's actually very exciting, but the lead up to the excitement and whether it was going to happen or not was a little bit stressful. So that's when I was kind of reading those summary books, the Taylor Jenkins Reid books and the rereads and things like that. It was just kind of calming me down a little bit. But yeah, my big news is that I am actually leaving my current job and I'm starting a new job in a completely different sector. So I'm going to be doing graphic design, which is super exciting. This is actually the first thing that I ever did when I left school, is I got a graphic design apprenticeship, but it never really went anywhere because the company was struggling a little bit and I got a little bit nervous, so I went into retail, and that's kind of where I've been ever since, and it's been about 5 years. So I'm really grateful that this company is giving me a shot at going back into graphic design and basically designing logos, branding, posters and things like that for people. I'm just super excited, and it's going to give me more of a schedule in terms of what I'm working every week. Like, I'm always going to know when I'm expected at work. Retail is really hard sometimes, and it also means that I'll get Christmas off, which is something that is personally really important to me and that I'm super excited for. And it hopefully means that I'll be getting a bit more money so I can move out soon, fingers crossed. But yeah, that is my big life update. It's been a journey. It felt like it was going on for months, but it was actually only going on for about a week. But I was just super stressed out because I think I just wanted the job so badly that I was nervous that I wasn't going to get it, and there were quite a few kind of things to do in order to get through to the final stage, but I am super grateful that I'm going to work for this company, and it's also super close to home, which is nice. So yeah, that's my little life update. So I'm sorry if I don't get to put out as many videos as I would like. I've tried to pre-film a little bit just for that kind of transition period, but I've got about 2 to 3 weeks until I actually leave the job that I'm at the moment. So I've still got some time, and then hopefully after that things will sink in a little bit easier and I'll be able to find a filming schedule and be able to get those videos out on time as planned. But yeah, anyway, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please do let me know if you read any of these books and what you thought, but I will see you in my next video. Bye!